Hi, my name's Ken Waters, and I want to tell a story about an old man and a bucket of shrimp. It's a true story. A version of it appeared in the book In the Eyes of a Storm by Max Lucado. I hope you like it. It happened every Friday evening almost without fail when the sun resembled a giant orange and was starting to dip into the blue ocean. Old Ed came strolling along the beach to his favorite pier. Clutched in his bony hand was a bucket of shrimp. Ed walks out to the end of the pier, where it seems he almost has the world to himself. Glow of the sun is a bronze now. Everyone's gone except for a few joggers on the beach. Standing out on the end of the pier, Ed is alone with his thoughts and his bucket of shrimp. Long before, however, he is no longer alone. Up in the sky, 1,000 white dots come screeching and squawking, winging their way towards that lanky frame standing there on the end of the pier. Before long, dozens of seagulls have enveloped him, their wings fluttering and flapping wildly. Ed stands there tossing shrimp to the hungry birds. As he does, if you listen closely, you can hear him say with a smile, "Thank you, thank you." In a few short minutes, the bucket is empty, but Ed doesn't leave. He stands there lost in thought, as though transported to another time and place. When he finally turns around and begins to walk back toward the beach, a few of the birds hop along the pier with him until he gets to the stairs, and then they too fly away. And old Ed quietly makes his way down to the end of the beach and on home. If you were sitting there on the pier with your fishing line in the water, Ed might seem like a funny old duck, as dads used to say. Or to onlookers, he's just another old codger lost in his own weird world, feeding the seagulls with a bucket full of shrimp. To the onlooker, rituals can look either very strange or very empty. They can seem altogether unimportant, maybe even a lot of nonsense. Old folks often do strange things, at least in the eyes of those a bit younger. Most of them would probably write off old Ed down there in Florida, and that's too bad. They do well to know him better. They can learn so much from him. And to give him his full name is Eddie Rickenbacker. Eddie Rickenbacker was the founder of Eastern Airlines. Before World War I, he was a seriously good race car driver. He was a national figure and nicknamed Fast Eddie. In World War I, he was a pilot and became America's first ace. He flew more patrols, more hours in the air than any other pilot in the service, a total of 300 combat hours. He brought down 15 aircraft in the final 6 weeks of the war, bringing his total victories to 26 and making him the United States ace of aces for the war. Rickenbacker was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross a record 8 times. And one of those awards was converted in 1930 to the Medal of Honor. He was also awarded the Legion of Honor in the Croix de Guerre by France. In 1919, Rickenbacker was discharged from the Army Air Service with the rank of captain. In World War II, he was an instructor and military advisor, and he flew missions with the combat pilots. In October 1942, he was sent on a tour of the Pacific Theater to review conditions and operations and to personally deliver a secret message to General Douglas MacArthur. During this tour, the B-17 in which he was flying went hundreds of miles off course from its scheduled stop at Camp Nowlan. Something went wrong with the navigation due to a severe shock in a pre-takeoff incident. In the end, the pilots were forced to ditch the plane in the Pacific Ocean, dangerously close to Japanese-held territory. Miraculously, all the 7-man crew survived the ditching, crawling out of their plane and climbed into 3 life rafts. Rickenbacker was still suffering from injuries from a prior airplane crash. Adamson, his business partner, sustained serious injuries in the water landing, and others in the crew were hurt to varying degrees. But they were all alive. Captain Rickenbacker and his crew floated for days in the rough waters of the Pacific. They fought the sun, they fought the sharks, but most of all, they fought hunger and thirst. By the 8th day, the rations ran out. No food, no water. They were hundreds of miles from land, and no one knew where they were, or even if they were alive. Every day across America, millions wondered and prayed that Eddie Rickenbacker might somehow be found alive. There had been an extensive search going on, and it was called off after 2 weeks. But Rickenbacker's wife pleaded for an extension, and the search continued for another week. The men adrift needed a miracle, and they knew it. They tried to nap, but it was difficult. Their throats were dry, their stomachs empty and painful, and their minds were playing tricks. Ed leaned back and pulled his military cap over his nose. Time dragged on. All he could hear was the slap of the waves against the raft. Suddenly, Eddie felt something land on the top of his cap. It was a seagull. Old Ed would later describe how he sat perfectly still, planning his next move. With a flash of his hand and a squawk from the gull, he managed to grab it and wring its neck. He removed the feathers, and he and his starving crew made a meal of it. It was a very slight meal for 8 men. Then they used the intestines for bait. With it they caught fish, which gave them food and more bait, and the cycle continued. For the next few days they survived by living on sporadic rainwater and similar food miracles. One of which happened during a very dark night when a pack of sharks chased a school mackerel through the 3-raft convoy. 2 of the fleeing fish landed in the rafts and were captured and promptly eaten. It was the first food they had eaten in nearly a week. They were staying alive, just. On the morning of the 21st day, Eddie Rickenbacker poured a jigger of water for each of the men in his raft. But neither Amundsen nor Bartek could raise their heads to drink. Rickenbacker successfully scooped up several small fish, but he realized that his strength too was ebbing away. It seemed unusually hot, and Rickenbacker kept looking for a sign. Any sign that might indicate land was in the vicinity. There was none, not even a gull. It was November 13, 1942, their 24th day at sea. It was to be a significant day. Rickenbacker heard planes, and sure enough, 2 float planes were approaching from the southeast. He waved his old hat as hard as he could, but the aircraft disappeared into the west. It was another kick in the guts. He knew darkness would arrive soon and probably eliminate any chance of being found. Their luck had turned, however. 30 minutes after the first sighting, the planes returned and headed straight for them. The planes were low enough that Rickenbacker could see the pilot, one of them smiling and waving a hand. They were the U.S. Navy. They had been found. Eddie Rickenbacker lived many years beyond that ordeal, but he never forgot the sacrifice of that life-saving seagull. That's why almost every Friday night he would walk to the end of the pier with a bucket full of shrimp and a heart full of gratitude to feed the gulls and to say thanks. When you stop to think of it, we have much in common with Captain Eddie. We too were in a helpless state. We too were in need of a miracle to deliver us, and we too received one. We were saved by the sacrificial visitor. Through his death, we were given life. which is why we, like Captain Eddie Rickenbacker, have every reason to look into the sky and offer our heartfelt thanks.